Bom dia. Íamos retomar então a segunda sessão do dia, depois da sessão de abertura. Depois do brilhante enquadramento feito pelo Diogo sobre a situação da rede de nova geração e como é que elas podem de facto ajudar neste clima de crise em que estamos, iremos passar para um painel onde vamos ver um caso concreto, o caso da cidade de Amsterdão e o que é que tem sido feito em Amsterdão para de facto levar a banda larga de alta velocidade, as redes de nova geração, à casa das pessoas, e também o enquadramento da Comissão Europeia sobre o que é que está a ser feito a nível da Comissão nesta área. Iremos começar com o João Schwartz da Silva, que é neste momento o diretor da Direção de Desenvolvimento de Redes e Serviços Convergentes e onde se supervisiona e é responsável pela área de desenvolvimento na área de comunicações móveis, redes de banda larga, incluindo satélites, redes de multimédia e habitacionais, engenharia de software e aplicações empresariais, que nos dará a visão sobre o que é que ele tem estado a trabalhar nesta área. João, por favor.
Ora, bom dia a todos, Sr. Secretário de Estado, Sr. Presidente da APDC. Foi com imenso prazer que aceitei o convite do Diogo para vir até cá e vou tentar tocar num certo número de aspectos relativamente à banda larga e à internet de amanhã. Se me dão licença, eu vou falar em inglês porque eu tenho todos os meus slides em inglês e é um bocado difícil olhando para os slides em inglês. Não consigo fazer o que o Diogo faz, que é falar em português com slides em inglês, mas se não se importam, vou falar em inglês. Ora bem, future broadband and future internet are issues that are of concern to us in Europe. What we have to consider today is that indeed we need to make this smart investment that is the logo of this particular conference. We need to do it. It's absolutely essential. But my suggestion to you is that beyond this short-term, immediate and necessary investment in broadband and internet, we need to have a longer-term strategy. And this is what I would like to develop before you. Let me say that I have been involved in research and development for the past many, many years, and I have been one of those in the European Commission that has pushed for what you now know as GSM, 5 million jobs created in Europe. I was one of those that pushed for UMTS. Today we don't have 5 million jobs because of UMTS, but we have a massive deployment of large-scale broadband mobile. Notably in China, you may have seen that Alcatel, Nokia, and Ericsson have each one got about 10% of the Chinese market for UMTS. We have invested significantly in digital high-definition television. So in all of these examples that I'm giving you, there was at the root of all this effort a coordination requirement of all European states. There was an ambition and a commitment to act. And this is what I would like to convey to you. Now, let's perhaps start very briefly with a couple of definitions. What is NGN? What is NGA? What is the Internet? Sometimes we tend to confuse all of these things. NGN is basically a network that carries media services with a quality of service and uses to carry that data encapsulated IP packets. Okay? But the essence of a next generation network is the quality of service. Then we have the next generation access, which basically refers to the last mile, or the local loop, which connects the user to the core network. The Internet is different. The Internet is first of all, millions of networks. There's about 28,000 so-called autonomous systems, which are all interlinked through something which is called a border gateway protocol. And in here in the Internet, there's no quality of service. There's a best effort that is being done. Now, today we're debating NGN and NGA, and by the way, the Commission is about to issue in the next few days a recommendation on next generation access that touches upon many of the things that were already mentioned. But basically, today, when we discuss NGN and NGA, we touch on all of these issues. To start with, the local loop unbundling. It's perhaps a bit old. But then we have the notion of open access and traffic shaping. To what extent are the network operators entitled or not entitled to shape traffic? And this is the issue of the network neutrality. When it comes to spectrum, how are we going to be using the so-called digital dividend? To what extent is network sharing, particularly in the mobile, allowed or not allowed? Build-out costs, ducts, and so on. Universal service provisioning. Today we have a universal service provisioning in Europe, which is a bit old-fashioned. It's 144 kilobits per second. This is a joke, to put it mildly. we should have the ambition to go a bit beyond the 144 kilobits per second. In some member states, take Finland, they have proposed 1 megabit per second. And they also propose at the same time 100 megabits per second in the year 2015. So 6 years from now, they propose to have 100 megabits per second, not to the user, but to 2 kilometers near to the user. And then the local mile, it's to be dealt with later on. But above all of these issues that we were discussing, including coverage in rural areas, which is a key concern for us, are the subject of ongoing debate. When it comes to rural areas, you should know that about 7% of the Europeans do not have access to any broadband or light broadband whatsoever. This is 35 million people. And it is our intention, as a result of the so-called economic recovery package in broadband, to solve partially this issue, and hopefully, if things go well, by the end of 2010, we should have 100% coverage of all Europeans. But as I said, 144 kilobits per second for universal service is a bit of a joke. We need to be a bit more serious when it comes to broadband. And to start with, something of the order of 30 to 50 megabits per second is a bit more serious today, especially if you start thinking of what is going to be carried on all these networks. Today we have television, okay? Tomorrow we'll have high-definition television. The day after tomorrow, which is not very far from today, we'll have what is called 4K television, 4,000 pixels per line with some sort of aspect ratio. That is going to require 6 gigabits per second throughput. There's no way that any network can cope with that. Of course, we can use compression to reduce it to something more meaningful, but what I'm suggesting to you is that we need to go well beyond that. Let me also say here that while in Finland they're talking about 100 megabits per second in 2015, the Koreans are talking about 1 gigabit per second in 2012. So we need to speed up this. Now it's clear, and Diogo mentioned it quite well, that broadband is crucial. It's key to many of the aspects of our life, jobs, new skills, and so on, cutting costs, efficiency, productivity. All of that is good. We estimate that if we keep on the current rate of adoption of broadband until 2015, that will create about 1 million jobs and will generate an economic activity of something like 850 billion euros. Now, we have called for investments in broadband infrastructure as part of this so-called economic recovery package of last December. Member states have been requested to define their own strategies nationally, and we only hope that at some stage all of this will come together and cooperate. Without cooperation at European level, we're not going to be able to succeed. As I said, NGA is one of our immediate concerns, and a recommendation is in the making and should be released. A recommendation on next generation access should be released within a month or so. In addition, we're preparing for end of the year a so-called communication on high-speed broadband strategy. Now, let me now start to migrate a bit into the future. This is a simple illustration of the variety of services that we now have on the net. One of the important aspects that you should remember is that if you simply think of video and think of user-generated video, the traffic of user-generated video is going to be multiplied by 3 between now and 2012. The traffic, commercial video traffic, is going to be multiplied by 5 in terms of quantity between now and 2012. This is huge, absolutely colossal. So it is not simply enough to say NGN, 1 megabit, 2 megabits. It won't do it. If this happens, we're going to have serious congestion on the networks. Now, there are many other issues that this picture tries to address. You may think of closed wall gardens, where you have IPTV services being provided by a network operator under very specific conditions, while at the same time, on the right-hand side, you have the open internet offering more or less the same content, perhaps without quality of service. But there is certainly a migration of people from the left to the right. Even though IPTV is a good market proposition, most people, especially the young generation, no longer see television as we, the old generation, see it. They get their news, they get access to television by looking at these things like YouTube, Netflixes, and so on. This is where the action is taken. Now, there's still another aspect which is important, so-called cloud services. More and more, and the best example of that is so-called netbooks, which now are deprived of even a hard disk, or have limited capabilities in terms of hard disk, no DVD drive, and so on. The intelligence is migrated to the network. And this is happening in Europe in massive numbers, not so much in the US. But if this happens, we are going to end up with situations where all services will migrate to so-called cloud somewhere. They're stored somewhere. They're dealt with somewhere. And this raises huge issues in terms of privacy, in terms of security, in terms of operational risk. The future of the internet for us is a future where not only we'll have individuals, we have devices in very, very large numbers, and we have billions of information sources of all kinds. The challenges we have is that the internet is going to expand from being an information service to a critical information service. And today's technologies, they must absolutely be improved. Today's internet is not functioning properly. You have seen certainly all of these information concerning viruses and things called Conflicker, which is going to explode, people say, tomorrow, with results that no one really understands. We need to deal with these things. Just to show you how these things are moving and how fast they're moving. This is the iPhone, introduced in July of last year. They have sold 17 million of these devices, Apple. The interesting thing is that the number of applications which is depicted there has grown from 0 to about 25,000 applications today, of which 5,000 were created last month. Okay? Now, in addition to this, we're now in a situation where economies of scale, you produce the same thing a million times, are now being replaced by a different sort of economy, where you have markets of one. If you think of, say, a BMW, there are 200,000 variations of a BMW. So more and more you have the core engine of these products, which is the same, but the rest is simply applications which you can download and get from different markets. In addition, there's another aspect which is important, is real-time service adaptation. A couple of figures to illustrate the speed and dynamics of change. Look at Google, 10 years old. It was started in 1998 and indexed 26 million pages. Today, last year, the number is 1 trillion pages, which are interlinked. There's 55 trillion connections in between all these pages. If you measure it in terms of emails that are sent per day, that's the number, of which 73% is spam, useless, waste of bandwidth. If you think of searches which are being conducted when you look for something, this is roughly the number in the US alone in October 2008. Facebook, MySpace, there's new countries which are being built out there, even though MySpace is taking a nosedive, Facebook is going up. They have over 100 million customers. How many pictures are uploaded in Flickr? That many. So the numbers are absolutely staggering, and the speed at which these things is taking place is also staggering. So the future, if you think about it and simply look at the last 4 or 5 years, is going to be radically different than the one we have today. And that's what we have to prepare to face with. A couple of other figures on traffic, measured in exabytes, if you wish, which is 10 to the 18 bytes. Those are curves provided by Cisco, which is a very good source of information when it comes to these sort of measurements. It shows very clearly that the projections are absolutely staggering again. Look at the situation from 2006 and all the way to 2012. These things are growing at a rate which the networks of today will not be able to hold. Now, how many users are there in the world of internet? This is it. In Asia, you have 650 million users, and all the way, Europe has the second highest number. But if you look at it in terms of, and those are fixed users, people sitting next to a PC. Now, if you say, how many mobile users are going to join this thing? We expect that there will be 5 billion mobile subscribers. Today there are 4 billion. There will be 5 billion in the year 2012. How many of those will use their mobile as a gateway to the internet? Portugal is a good example of that. Many. We estimate that about 1.5 billion will be using 3G and HS, PDA and LTE and so on. And this is going to make the internet of today grow extremely fast in just 3 years. Now, if you look at these figures in terms of penetration, North America has the highest penetration. They're almost close to saturation. And Asia only has 17%. The message is that since they have a very low penetration rate and very high number of users already, if they are allowed to grow to 73% and 100%, most of the development on the internet is not going to come from the US or Europe. It's going to come from elsewhere. The usage patterns and everything that you expect to have on the internet is going to be shaped by the tastes of people in Asia and Africa and other places. Now, two particular aspects. There are many aspects of internet that are important. Two of them I'd like to mention. One is the Internet of Things. Every object, every product that you can think of is going to have some sort of a digital log. It will record with it where it was produced, where it's going, what is the temperature, who is manipulated it. There will be a digital life log of every product, be it a pharmaceutical product or a part for a car. When this happens, we're going to be confronted with networks of such a size that no one has the faintest clue as to how they should be architected. This is important. Then all of these objects will have some sort of embedded intelligence that will allow new entrepreneurs and new innovators to create new value chains, addressing market niches which today simply do not exist. 2 minutes, okay, let me go fast. Skip this one. A word about trust. I already mentioned a while ago the story of the security and the viruses and so on. What we're confronted with is a situation where the technological space and the regulatory space that used to be the same are diverging. And today, we as citizens of the world, of Europe and of the world in particular, we're confronted with regulations of Europe that don't apply elsewhere. There is a real problem that needs to be addressed. If we don't solve this problem of the difference between the technological space and the regulatory space, we'll never be able to put forward the solutions that will end the privacy abuses which are out there, the Facebooks and so on and so on. So we need to deal with this. Let me be brief. So my suggestion to you is that very soon a new internet will be born, and we need to be prepared for that. Today's networks are rather primitive. If you simply think of many of the applications I've showed you that didn't exist 4 or 5 years ago, tomorrow's networks are going to be a bit different from the ones we have today. We're going to be confronted with these pervasive, massively distributed devices that will sense the environment, that will be context aware, that will create information flows that are absolutely new in areas such as energy, transportation, health, education, and others. We believe that at national level, now is the time to act, to define how the future should be prepared. In addition to what Portugal is doing on a short-term basis, which is fine, which must be done, there must be a vision as to what sort of strategy Portugal should have to face the future. We think that more and more the notion of public-private partnership for the future internet is absolutely important. We're spending today 800 million euros on future internet work in research. So if you multiply that by the appropriate ratio, this is in excess of $1 billion just in the last 3 years. So we would like very much to encourage you in Portugal to join in. If you're alone and you don't join in this coordinated effort at European level, something is going to be missed. That's my last slide. So we think that recovery in today's days of economic recovery must be a recovery which should be based on innovation, on productivity. We should be looking at the future and create for tomorrow the innovation niches that are going to be those where people will have jobs. Internet is going to change, and it changed radically. Just look back at what has happened 10 years ago, from the last 10 years. There's a unique opportunity in Europe to move it, to do it together. One condition is that we have the ambition to do it, the commitment to act, and above all, the requirement to work together. Thank you for your attention.